Dragon Quest III was given the HD-2D treatment by Square Enix, bringing the game up to a graphical modern standard. The thing is, the game is close to 36 years old already, so will the remake outdo its original self and prove it's more than just a HD-2D makeup? Well, find out in this review.
Hey, this is Sean from Gamer Braves. It's been 8 years since we established Gamer Braves channel. We went to a lot of overseas game conference. We did a lot of exclusive interview with a lot of prominent figures from the industry, Ryuzo Sugimoto, Sean Layden, and even Yagu. One of the easiest way to support us is to subscribe to our channel. Support like this will actually gives us motivation and pushes us to produce better content. If you have already subscribed, thank you so much. Please enjoy the rest of the video.
First of all, we have to talk about how influential the Dragon Quest series actually is. The Dragon Quest series introduced a lot of mechanics that have become very prominent in a lot of JRPGs that we see today, like for example class systems, linear structures, world building, and so on. It's practically become the default image for what a JRPG looks like, and it has a very strong fanbase with Japanese fans. So with such a strong influence in its background, how does the remake live up to the original from 1988? Well, let's first talk about the story. Without getting into spoilers, of course. It's practically unchanged to the original story. You play as the hero, whose task is to hunt down a demon to save the world from evil. So it's a pretty bog standard good versus evil story. The chemistry between the player and your companions doesn't really exist. At most, your companions sometimes have a simple yes or no option. The player can't speak, and your companions are basically just a blank slate, though this will come important later in the job system. Overall, we think the story is very much a story of its time. Perhaps this was mind-blowing back in 1988, but our standards for stories have changed over the years, and we've already seen these type of stories. Still, the remake is based off the original, so we weren't expecting it to divert that much. Moving on to the more obvious change, the remake has revived this 36-year-old game with Square Enix's HD 2D style, which was seen in other Square Enix games like Octopath Traveler and Triangle Strategy. The style of HD 2D retains the original 2D pixel art charm while polishing up the environments, atmosphere, and lighting effects. And we think this style absolutely works in Dragon Quest III's favor, and it looks absolutely gorgeous. The graphics, combined with the dynamic environment, really made the game's world feel alive. We saw this with the seamless transition between dynamic weather, as well as day and night cycles. During different times of the day, towns can either be bustling with people, or just be dead quiet. This kind of immersive world just makes sense. The new music arrangement is also a feast for the ears. We especially love the new version of the overworld theme. It's still such an iconic track 36 years later, which really gives you the vibe of a grand adventure. Overall, combined with the HD 2D treatment, the rearrangement of the music, and the immersiveness of the world, it is an absolute treat for the eyes to explore, and it is definitely the remake's strongest point. But moving on from its strong points, the remake comes with a lot of weak points as well. You see, the game's combat has not evolved much from the original, and that brings the same headaches from 36 years ago. The combat still looks outdated, it is extremely grindy, and it is painfully slow. Thankfully, you can speed up the battles, which is a godsend. At minimum, playing in fast mode is what we recommend. Despite this quality of life feature though, other parts of battle are still super slow, given we cannot skip them, like for example the text box when you level up. It sounds like a small nitpick, but it does add up over time. In terms of looks, it's a stark contrast to the lively and detailed world of the HD 2D treatment. Compared to the original, we now have an additional camera angle where we can see our party, but when attacking, the camera angle switches to this first-person perspective, where you can only see the enemy. So it's a bit of a shame, since you can't see your characters attack at all. While the animations of the actual attack do look better, it really is just some flashy particle effect and the enemy shaking. As mentioned earlier, speeding up the game is basically necessary, so there's even less time to appreciate the animations. We just think it's a waste of potential of the HD 2D treatment, though it does still retain the style of the original's combat. Grinding in this game is absolutely mandatory as well. Despite having tons of random encounters, we were surprised even that was not enough to keep your characters leveled up for new areas. The classic elements don't make the grind easier either. The game is stingy with resources and pretty punishing. Like for example, a downed character can only be revived at a church or priest in various towns, with a huge sum of money of course. So backtracking is basically unavoidable, unless you stock up on a bunch of chimera rings to fast travel. A lot of these setbacks were found in the early hours of the game, and it will certainly get easier the more you progress. But the fact that the grind still persists for the majority of the game, it just threw the pace of the game off a little. Aside from how it feels, the turn-based combat itself has some features that feel gimmicky and outdated. As an example, there's no turn order, so you have no idea who's going first. When facing multiple types of enemies, you can't choose which one to attack either, unless it's the same type of enemy. But more than often, the enemies you face are of different species and types and so on, so in certain situations, this targeting system is a bit unintuitive. This kind of problem does exist in other games, and it's an extension of that game's mechanics, so it's not really a Dragon Quest III problem, though the age of its mechanics are definitely showing. Overall, it's clear that this game's combat mechanics are very old school. While some players might still enjoy the straightforwardness of traditional turn-based combat, we found that it could use some polish or adjustments. If only there was some motivating factor to keep you engaged, like, an interesting story or satisfying combat system, but as we just touched on earlier, those aren't exactly the remake's strong points. While the combat itself isn't the best, what comes before the combat was really interesting, which was the surprisingly in-depth job system. In this game, you have to make your party members, which could be the reason why the player barely has any chemistry with them, so in that sense, it could be a plus, since you won't get that FOMO of not bringing your favorite character. There's lots of things to build your party with. First off is the actual job, or vocation itself, which there are a good selection of. Some examples would be the versatile hero, the nimble martial artist, the magic caster mage, the money grinding merchant, and even a brand new one called the monster wrangler, who can make use of friendly monsters. Every character also has their own personalities, which will provide different advantages and disadvantages to their potential in combat. It's a pretty unique take on the trait system that you'd see in other JRPGs, so there's a lot of experimentation for you to do. Speaking of experimentation, there's a lot of customization as well. You can change their name, appearance, hair color, and even how they groan in battle. Overall, it's quite rare to see this level of building and customization in party-based JRPGs, though this might be possible since your party members are basically blank slates, unlike other JRPGs that have set-in-stone party members. Of course, this remake isn't just about the graphics. There have been a bunch of additional quality of life features that really make this game more playable in the modern day, like as mentioned earlier, speeding up the combat animations. Besides that, there are 3 difficulty options, though we found it to be a little bit unbalanced. The lowest difficulty, called Draki Quest, prevents your characters from dying and will leave them at 1 HP, so it basically makes your entire party invincible. The impact of these difficulty options will vary between players, but we think there could have been a more creative way to do this. We did rely on this difficulty a little to progress faster, so I guess it has its uses. Some other quality of life examples would be customizing the minimap, displaying the objective, changing different audio effect volumes, and many more, a lot of which would not have been present 36 years ago, so they're very much a welcome addition. One feature we do want to highlight though is the recall feature, where, as the name suggests, you can recall the memories and important encounters throughout the game, without needing to reload a save. So it is a really great tool to remind you of some context for the story. Though we personally didn't use it too much ourselves, but it's good to know that it's there when we need it. Overall, we can see how Dragon Quest III's remake is a faithful one. It's great to know they've put the effort into keeping the various elements that gave the original game its charm, but keeping these classic elements have also retained the various headaches that didn't age too well. Story-wise, it's basically the same as the original, so enjoyers of the original story will certainly enjoy it once again, though it would have been cool to see some additional implementations to make the story more appealing and modern. And we're not talking about changing the story, but perhaps more cutscenes could be revamped with the HD 2D style and maybe even more voice acting. The HD 2D visual upgrade looks absolutely fantastic, and it's one of the best things about the remake. Square Enix has gone the extra step to make sure the environment and world actually feel alive to complement the HD 2D treatment. Combined with the rearranged soundtrack, it is a beautiful world to immerse yourself into. But the HD 2D's potential falls flat with the combat. Your character animations are completely hidden, and the attack animations, while looking pretty, are just flashy looking effects. It's a shame they didn't decide to experiment more on the combat, especially with HD 2D. More on combat, the slow speed and super specific game mechanics make the combat a bit of a hassle, and it doesn't help that you have to go through this over and over again because of the extremely high random encounter rate, and the grind just never stops. We think it could have been better if we could choose to engage the enemies freely instead of random encounters, because at one point we had like 3 encounters in the span of 30 seconds. Spread it across an entire dungeon and it gets tiring really quickly. At least the party building with the job system felt really interesting, and it had a lot of depth. We can see there's a lot of potential to experiment with different party members, not just with the job, but their personality and looks as well, of which the blank slate companions allow this to be possible, and it really gets rid of that FOMO of being forced to use specific characters. Speeding up the combat animations and autosaving was also something we can't imagine playing without. So overall, the quality of life features really make the game more user-friendly, and players 36 years ago would have definitely appreciated it. At the end of the day, a JRPG is often carried by the story, characters, and combat, but as we mentioned in this review, the Dragon Quest III Remake is a bit lacking in these aspects. We have no doubts it was a revolutionary game 36 years ago. Dragon Quest fans would definitely appreciate seeing this game in a new light. But for those looking to get into the series, we personally think that Dragon Quest XI is a much better starting point. Looking from a different perspective, if Square Enix's goal was to retain the original experience as faithfully as possible, then the Dragon Quest III Remake certainly allows players to have a taste of what it was 36 years ago, but on modern hardware. Overall, we give the Dragon Quest III HD-2D Remake an 8 out of 10. With that said, will you be picking up the Dragon Quest III Remake? Let us know if you agree with us, and don't forget to subscribe for more future videos just like this one.